order. If you'd join me for the pledge, please. I pledge allegiance to the flag
of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you for joining us. We'd like to start off with some recognitions.
Thank you. Yeah, this evening we'd like to recognize Paul P.J. Ataya, who's here in the audience with us. So, Paul, if you can come on up, that would be great. Right there, yeah. So, Paul was our Project 351 representative. So, I'm going to give you a little background about what Project 351 is, and then we're going to ask Paul to share some of his experiences being part of the project. So, Project 351 is an independent nonprofit organization that builds a movement of youth-led service by allowing each of Massachusetts' 351 cities, hence Project 351, and towns, to select one Project 351 ambassador. The ambassadors are selected based on their demonstration of leadership, service, and commitment to their local community. And Paul was nominated by our middle school teachers, guidance counselors, and administration to be the representatives. So they actually select one 8th grader from every community within the state of Massachusetts. The ambassadors then have a day of service, which is generally Martin Luther King Day. So Paul participated in that. And then the ambassadors are invited for a year to participate in leadership and service activities throughout Massachusetts and also within their local community. So Paul was selected as our Project 351 ambassador as an 8th grader who's done an outstanding job within our school system in terms of demonstration of leadership, service, and commitment. So Paul, can you tell us a little bit about what was it like to be a 351 ambassador? What did you do? What happened on that day?
Well, first it was actually
Just move the mic towards your mouth if you don't.
All right.
Thanks, Paul. Thank
first just being brought into the office and being told that I was selected out of one 8th grader throughout the whole school was honoring, and knowing that there's going to be plenty of other people like me going to the service day that we had. The service day was probably one of the most motivational things I've ever been to. Very inspiring to just go out and know that just one person can make a change in a community in such a big way. And since there were so many of us going out to do different services, it was really good knowing that we were helping so many different people that day. I personally got stationed into the group of the service hero Mary Kringen, and everyone had their own group that got launched out to a certain place. I was launched to the Pine Street Inn, and I worked in the kitchen for 2 hours making food for the homeless people for the day after during the snowstorm. So there would be plenty of extra and or just enough food for the homeless that had to come into the shelter. It felt really good knowing that so many different people that would come in the next day would have food on in front of them, even though they're not used to it or not really. A lot of the people that go into places like that don't really accept it, and one person we spoke to was telling us how he was one of the people that thought, yes, being out in the cold is a lot worse than being inside in a shelter, but other people would tell you that they wouldn't come into places like this because they feel like they're being looked down onto and they're a worse person, so they want to try to make it on their own. It was just great being there and knowing that I was helping people, and it was probably the most inspiring to hear plenty of the state representatives speak as well. Charlie Baker was there and gave a giant speech on how important it was to be part of this cause and how lucky we were to be part of it. I was honored.
So did you all came together, then you went on and did your service, then you came back and had some local speakers, including Charlie Baker.
Yeah.
Some speakers. Did you have dinner?
No, it opened.
No.
It opened up with the speeches and stuff like that. Then we launched for a couple hours, and then came back and did a quick recap on what we were doing and how the year was going to pan out.
Do you know any of the other service activities that are planned for the year?
Coming up, we're doing actually very soon. I'm going to start getting together a clothing drive in the school for Cradles of Crayons, where we're going to set up a box in probably the middle school foyer to get people to donate clothes to the less fortunate children that are out in the cold or need certain clothes to survive. Their target range is probably like anywhere from just being born to 12 years old, and they want fairly new clothes, so you won't like get rips and stuff.
And we can definitely help you advertise that so that people know that that's
Sure.
going on within
Yeah.
the school system. And that's one of the goals of Project 351 is to have you do a local service activity within your own community. So we're glad to see you doing that. I don't know if anybody else has any other specific questions for Paul. Obviously, he's been an outstanding representative of Carver Middle High School, and we were proud to have him be our representative for Project 351.
Sounds like a very powerful experience for you so far.
Yeah.
Something that's just starting, though.
Yeah, it just the launch day was on Martin Luther King Day, and then the rest of the year is gonna have plenty of other things to get together with.
Awesome. Well,
And
congratulations and thanks.
this
for
was
that.
originally started by Governor Patrick.
Yep.
And each year they've kind of built on it. The first couple of years, they just did the day of service. And then they said, this has been such a powerful thing, we think we need to add in this other component of kind of bringing a service activity back to your local community and staying involved for a year. And my understanding is they're actually now, you'll have your year of service, but their goal is almost like to maintain that connection with the Project 351 students, at least all the way through high school. And making that connection is almost having like not necessarily reunions, but keeping a networking system together for all those students who've worked and been Project 351 ambassadors. So Paul, it's something you'll be able to maybe participate in for several years to come. So congratulations.
Congratulations.
Congratulations. Terrific.
Thank you.
All right. Thanks, Paul.
Thank you, Paul.
Have a nice evening.
Take care. Thank you. Moving on to comments from the general public. Seeing none. Comments from the EAPC.
Good evening. That was a tough act to follow. We don't have anything as, well, we have some exciting news. We had our forum the other day. Scott was able to attend. We appreciate the support showing up there. We're actually, it'll be probably a perfect segue into a later agenda item. And also, we have February vacation coming up, and the school year's steaming on. Tammy, would like to?
Yeah, just quick share some of the updates that's going on. We have been working really hard with Scott and the administration and on the evaluation committee, and I just wanted to kind of mention that because it's been some exciting work, a lot of really tough questions and things that have been worked out, and it's been part of, I just wanted to mention it's been a really great thing. We're looking forward to the rollout this spring. I'm not good at remembering dates, so.
So you're going to introduce it in the spring for something that you'll do next year? Is that the plan?
Yes, and technically, everything that's agreed upon by the evaluation committee will come back to the school committee. Because we did agree to it as part of the collective bargaining agreement.
Correct.
So obviously, so we have this group that's working on it, that will create a tentative agreement
Yeah.
of what the new evaluation system will look like next year. The APC will bring it back to its membership. I'll bring it back to the committee, and then we'll hopefully formalize it and move forward with the intent of implementation next fall.
Awesome.
And what I think our
Far more
deadline,
friendly.
what we agreed to in the negotiations was June 1st, bringing something back by June 1st, which will definitely meet that timeline.
Fantastic. Thank you.
Thank you.
We have someone from the Student Advisory Council here tonight.
Hello.
Hey, long time no see, Jenna.
Do you want to go here?
Yeah, you
Hi.
can just talk in the mic.
All right, hello. So we have a lot of updates for you tonight. So first I want to talk about Winter CMASC, which I wasn't here to tell you guys about. So Winter CMASC was held at Attleboro High School on January 10th. We had 7 people from Carver High School attend, and Josh and I were on stage, running everything. So what we did, we had plenty of workshops. We had a hypnotist come, which was very cool. We had Josh Kennedy from Carver and Bella Tabadji get hypnotized. Josh was tricked into thinking that toilet paper was money, and he thought he made $1 million. And Bella was screaming a lot, so that was really fun. I personally led a workshop about leadership roles and how we can view people in society as different roles based on their jobs. but leaders can come in all different shapes and sizes. So next we have MASC coming up, which is an annual spring conference held at the Hyannis Resort and Conference Center. It's from March 6th to the 8th, and the theme is Jurassic Park, Launch Your Leadership, about dinosaurs and all that great stuff. So it's a 3-day conference where it has keynote speakers, workshops, and banquet, dance, planning. It's very fun, and a lot of leadership skills are gained from that. And along with MASC, we submitted our excellence book, which just highlights all the things that our student council's done throughout the year. So some of the things we've done, we're doing actually Mr. Crusader, which I'll get into later, and an Apple Pie Social and Crusader Fest and all that stuff that we've done over the years. And we send that into MASC, and they give us points based on it. So for the past, I want to say 7 years, we've gotten the Gold Council of Excellence. So we're hoping for that 8th year to this year. So we'll find that out on March 9th, and I'll come back to you guys and let you know if we got gold. And then after that, we have our spring conference coming up, and that's at Pembroke High School on April 13th, I want to say. That's at Pembroke, and the theme is The Amazing Race, like about leadership, and we have 2 people who are considering running for regional positions for CMASC. We have Morgan Campbell, who's considering running for a publicity coordinator, just like Josh is, and Maya Lebrecq, who's considering running for delegate. Yeah.
Fantastic.
Oh,
Great.
just threw a lot at you. You have any questions?
So are they going to have to perform a bunch of events in order to get,
Yeah.
yeah?
Yeah, we have actually Mr. Crusader coming up, and that's on this Wednesday. So Mr. Crusader is a male pageant we have, and we have 7 contestants all competing for the title of Mr. Crusader. We have a group dance together, aquawear, Carver wear, a question and answer. So that's this Wednesday at 6 o'clock. If any of you would like to come, we'd really appreciate it. Adults are $5 and students are $3. Starts at 6 in the auditorium.
I don't know.
Got a lot.
Great.
Any questions?
Thank you for the update.
Yeah,
Thanks for the
great
update.
update. We love when you come through. It's great.
Moving on to approval of minutes. We have to make an adjustment, and we are only going to approve the regular session minutes. The executive session minutes will be discussed in executive session.
So I'll make a motion to approve the regular session minutes from January 14th.
Second.
Motion made and second. Any questions, comments, changes?
Nope.
All those in favor?
Aye.
It's unanimous.
Personnel updates. Since last time we met, we've had a couple small personnel movements. We had the resignation of Christina Robinson as a special ed para at the middle high school. We hired a new para, Mary Lemon, as a long-term substitute para at the elementary school. And we have a transfer. We have one of our paras, Jocelyn Kelly, is going to be the long-term sub for Susanna Doyle in grade 3 at the elementary school. So that's our personnel movements from this past month. Our next item, we'd like to invite Tammy Johnson up. Tammy's going to make a presentation about the MTA campaign called Fund Our Future. I was going to talk about the purpose of the campaign, but I guess we should just let Tammy do that. So
Yeah.
I will turn it over to Tammy.
It's
who's gonna
not, and I was going to be very considerate of our time. But it is very exciting. I think I remember kind of rolling it out a little bit in December, and unfortunately in January, it became ill. And so thank you for this opportunity.
No
I really
problem. Thank
appreciate
you.
it. And Meredith, there is one slide that I'm going to skip and then hopefully go back to, if that's okay.
I can dance.
I know, oh, good. Because I was like looking at
Meredith's
like,
pretty good at trying to figure out when to push the slides.
yeah.
I heard the turbo noise. from when we were here.
Thank you. So thank you again. I'm looking forward to explaining our Fund Our Future campaign. So starting off, and even back in the 1700s, John Adams, when he wrote the state constitution, included public education, or, as not public education, but education at that time. So the next slide. Basically, one of the things that was written into the Constitution was to cherish. So cherish the interest of literature and scientists, and especially the University of Cambridge, public schools, and grammar schools in our towns. So we basically went to cherish to adequately funding. So the next slide is the Chapter 70 pupil aid, which basically this slide shows that from 2001 to currently, our funding, state funding for public schools has basically gone down 1/3. of its spending. And that's taking into consideration the adjustment for inflation and so you can see as it goes through, hasn't gone back. So the next slide, we talk about getting how we got here. So just more recent, we went from the 1700s to now 1978. So the school funding reform that is the foundation of education reform has its roots in the school finance case that has existed in Massachusetts for over 40 years. The Webby versus Dukakis. Over the 40 years, there's been a pattern of activity in the lawsuit followed by the legislator passing a revision of school funding statutes that work for a period of time after which the lawsuit is activated again. The first version, as I said, Webby versus Dukakis, resulted in the establishment of Chapter 70 funding. The second sequel, Webby versus Dukakis, was filed and provided the impetus for Chapter 188, so the education reform of the 1980s. Neither of these cases actually were decided by the court. However, in 1993, the McDuffie-Robertson case, the state Supreme Judicial Court found the school system funding in Massachusetts to be unconstitutional. Days after the decision, the legislature passed the Education Reform Act. So the foundation budget was included in the Education Reform Act of 1993. And so we can skip that one for now. I'll go right back to it. So in looking at even more recently, in 2003, we have the Hancock versus Driscoll in 1999, which the plaintiffs lost. However, the inequities exist across the state. The Foundation Budget Review Commission report was in 2015. So the current foundation understates the cost of at least $1 billion. And then in 2016, we attempted to do the Fair Share Amendment, which by our polling showed that across the community in the state, we had over up to 70% of people that were in favor of the Fair Share Amendment. However, the question fell by a decision made by the Massachusetts Supreme Judicial Court. So going back, where we are, back to the higher ed one. So where we are, we have two pieces of legislation that are being supported by Senator Chiang Des, and one of them is the Promise Act and the other is the Charis Act. So this is I thought, pretty powerful slide showing the appropriations for higher education per student from 2001 to 2015 with, again, a 32% decline, which has resulted in unbearable student debt as that has been increasing. And then a lot of educators are living in poverty due to the decrease of full-time faculty. So the hiring of full-time faculty has become less and less, and the hiring of adjuncts. So we are now, how much are our schools owed? So what we figure, and I know there's lots of figures out there, especially one of the things that we found at the forum, there were a lot of people talking about these, but basically these are some area districts. Fall River, 33 million, Carver, 398,000, Plymouth, 2.7 million, Malden, 17 million, higher education, 574 million, Brockton, 46 million, Middleborough, 628,000, Springfield, 94 million, Wareham, 2.8 million. So, and there's our check, which we're hoping the amount of money, the way that the legislation is written, isn't to be coming, they have until 2023 to have that account. It accounts for about $50 per student. So thank you, Scott, for that information. There's the big check. And if you needed, I know you had this since January, so if you do need to go for any information, the next slide shows how you can go on to massteacher.org, fund our future. And I am wrapping this up very quickly. The next one, it actually shows the school committees. These are the school committees that signed on in January. So there were 34 school committees that signed on in January. Some of them included Fall River, Framingham, Holbrook, Marshfield, Middleborough, Old Rochester Regional, Seekonk, Wareham, Worcester. And unless anybody has signed on prior since this afternoon, I've counted.
I did, just so you know, Terry, in their background, I did put a link. I put the link in.
Oh, nice.
With the most
Thank you.
up-to-date list of
Right.
schools that have signed on.
So I looked at that, and at this point, there's 54 districts that have signed on, which now include our area, Bourne, Brockton, Dennis, Yarmouth, Hull, New Bedford, and Weymouth. So So again, here we go. The resolution to support full funding for public education. This isn't to support our Fund Our Future campaign, the Promise Act, which realistically accounts for healthcare, ELL, and special education costs. As we know, those are some really important areas that need to be funded. And then, of course, there's the Cherish Act to go back to where, this is so funny, we want to go back to where 2001 per student funding level was. It's kind of sad, but. And then moving forward, my next slide, I had the Fund Our Future Forum that was in Plymouth, which obviously is said and done. However, there are 3 local ones coming up, and they are on the website, but I just wanted to give a shout out for them. Bridgewater State College is February 26th at 4 p.m. Marshfield High School has one March 5th at 6 p.m. Cape Cod Community College has one on March 14th at 5 p.m. And so, with that, I would like, I know this is something you need to discuss, but I actually have 2 very nice, clean copies with everyone's names on it. So, that's for the next thing. So, I want to, again, thank you so much for your time, for this something that's important that can make a difference in a lot of our children's lives. Thank you.
Thank you, Tammy, very much.
Thank you.
Tammy?
So the next step would be to look for a motion of resolution.
I'll make a motion to support the resolution of full funding of our public schools.
Mine's second.
Okay, motion's made and seconded. Questions, comments, thoughts, suggestions, anything you got?
I would say it seems like a no-brainer that we would look to support this. I would be interested to see next steps as to what we would, other than just verbally saying we support it, what else we could do. And I think that's something we can talk about as a committee and through Scott, find out more. Because yes, saying we support something is great, but maybe doing something along with it would be supportive also.
I can address that a little bit if you'd like me to at this time, or I can hold until there's other questions or comments.
Oh.
Nope.
Andy?
I agree.
Yeah, just in terms of things that are happening, there's been a lot of, obviously, discussion about the couple bills that are out there, the Promise Act from Senator Sonia Chang Diaz, the governor's budget, which is also proposing an increase to funding for education. And there's been a lot of discussion both from the Massachusetts Association of School Committees and the Mass Association of School Superintendents on what actions we can take to best support these pieces of legislation. A little bit concerning for us, for Carver, is that when you look at some of this funding, even in the governor's budget right now, so we hear that it's $1 billion for education, but within that governor's budget for Carver, because have been held harmless, which we've discussed before with the committee, we would still only get the minimum aid of $20 per pupil. So, our advocacy point is we need to do better than that. At least get to the $50 of it, $50 per student, which gets us to $398 over the 5 years. And the governor's budget does that over 7 years. The Promise Act does it over 5, which would be a higher amount of money. The governor's budget does it over 7. But there's also other things that would really support us as a district beyond this. So the Mass Association of School Superintendents actually asked, I was at their midwinter meeting, they said if you're a district that is currently under the governor's proposed budget or the Promise Act not getting as much as some other districts, like only getting the minimum aid, that they wanted to be notified and talk about that. So I did have a conversation with the director of the Mass Association of School Superintendents, Tom Scott, and they actually just came out with a position paper on Friday in terms of points of advocacy, even beyond what the governor is proposing. It may be equal to or better than what the Promise Act is proposing. Now, I'm not saying these things are going to happen, but it's their point of advocacy. And their point of advocacy is keyed on a couple things which would be really important to us as the Carver school community. One is fully funding circuit breaker. The circuit breaker special ed account, right now in the budgets, it talks about doing that at 68%. They're saying that the state law requires it's supposed to be at 75%. Funding circuit breaker at 75% would definitely be beneficial for us as a district. They're actually advocating $150 per year per student starting this year. Now, that may not happen, But that, if we had our Chapter 78 increased by $150 per student, that would be a significant amount of money. It's actually $237,000.
Who's advocating that?
The Mass Association of School Superintendents. And they're saying that for all districts. So their position is that for every district in the state of Massachusetts, it should be an equal increase of $150 per pupil based on current population. That's their point of advocacy. Now, there's been no legislation filed on their point of advocacy yet, where the Promise Act is a piece of legislation that's been filed, the Cherish Act is a piece of legislation that's been filed, and the governor's filed his budget. So those pieces are all there. They've also advocated for us to contact our local legislators. So actually, I'm in the process of, I drafted letters today to our local legislators saying to support increased funding for education in general, the whole concept of Fund Our Future, but then specifically also to focus on circuit breaker, and then sorry, I went out of order. I meant to talk about a third thing. I was just talking about circuit breaker, per pupil expenditure, and then charter schools. The other piece is saying that they should fully fund the charter school legislation. Right now, charter schools, if it's fully funded, we get 100% reimbursement in the first year that a student goes to a charter school. So that cost technically is supposed to be a neutral cost. Then the next 4 years, we're supposed to get 25% of that cost. The point of advocacy from the Massachusetts Association of School Superintendents, and also in the governor's budget, would be that the first year would be 100% tuition reimbursement. The second year would be 60%, so a higher percentage of reimbursement. And then the third year would be 40%. Years 4 and 5 would be 25 and 25%. So that just puts more money into charter school reimbursement, which would bring more money into the town of Carver and eventually to the Carver schools. And so that's a huge piece of advocacy. So there's a lot of things going on here, but in terms of the resolution, in terms of Fund Our Future, in terms of this piece, ultimately, in my mind, all of these things come back to, there's a coalition of people coming together saying the state has to do a better job funding education in the state of Massachusetts. And there might be competing ideas on how that's going to happen and what might best serve Carver. But ultimately, it's all the right direction. It's all everyone coming together saying the state needs to do more to support education throughout the entire state. So I'm in support of supporting the resolution. I just wanted to talk about some of the other things that were going, because you brought up what are some other things going on besides the resolution. So I want you to know that I've been actively engaging the Massachusetts Association of School Superintendents. I'm actively engaging our state legislators to support whatever piece of legislation comes out. So I think something's going to happen. By the time this budget's passed, there's going to be more funding for education in the state of Massachusetts, and all of that's going to be beneficial for us. And us as a committee, or you as a committee taking the vote to support this resolution is part of that process, part of that point of advocacy. And then I'm also going to be doing things as well beyond that. And I think it's all of us working together to apply pressure where we can. I have the ability to do that to the Mass Association of School Superintendents, so I can do that there. Obviously, the MTA is doing it through their piece, and we all want to work together with the same goal of increasing funding. All right, so I'm starting to get repetitive, so I'll push the mic away from me.
Can I just have a really quick
absolutely.
second? Because
Yeah.
I forgot. I actually have had this in my bag to actually hand out to everyone, but I actually have a what's next, Andy. So I wanted to be able to share that with you, and it's exactly what Scott said. So in working together, all it is basically, basic what we've talked about on the top, and then the different legislators in each area town. So I'm going to pass that around. And this is David Ashley, and he also wanted to say something real quick. He's from the MTA.
Yeah, hi, thank you, Tammy. David Ashley, Massachusetts Teachers Association. I just wanted to make the point that obviously there are multiple pieces of legislation which have been filed surrounding education funding in the state. I believe there are 4, if you include that filed by Stand for Children. The MTA's position is that our legislation, the Promise and Cherish Acts respectively, are by far and away the most beneficial to public schools and colleges in the state of Massachusetts. It fully implements the bipartisan funding recommendations from 2015. And if implemented in the way that it has been outlined, it would bring $1.5 billion to pre-K through public higher education in the state. Superintendent Neef, obviously, thank you for your support of increased education, and by signing this resolution, it's a step in order to secure the monies that our public schools, students in our communities have been lacking since early 2000. 2001, we saw a dramatic decrease in the way that our public schools are funded. We have felt that, I believe, in the state of Massachusetts, certainly in the town of Carver. And an immediate next step would be to support the resolution this evening and to take the next steps outlined there. And, obviously, Superintendent Neef, what you've described as well. Thank you for your time.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Andy?
Was there anything mentioned in either one of these legislations about, pieces of legislation about special ed, specifically what they're gonna do to
Yes.
alter the formula for that?
Yes, I mean, I don't have the exact modifications with me this evening, but obviously special education is one of the main parts of the foundation foundation formula, which are being underfunded. So health insurance, special education, and then ELL and ESL populations. So the realities of the current, composition of our schools, the realities of our students are accounted for in this formula. And in many ways, that's where you see the increase in number. I believe it's 396,000, 398,000 for Carver. Pardon me, that's by and large where that comes in.
I think transportation is one of our biggest costs for special ed. That was specifically something I was,
That would fit into the special.
Sure.
and also,
That goes along with Scott's of the circuit breaker, so that's kind of exciting.
That's huge.
yeah, oh, yeah.
That's huge.
My other question is, as a school committee member, I am in support of increasing funding, obviously, for our schools. As a taxpayer, my question would be, where does either one of these pieces of legislation propose to get the money, the increased monies from?
Certainly. When Governor Baker proposed his budget regarding school increases, I believe, if I'm not mistaken, that he could do it within his budget absent increasing any taxation. There has been legislation filed recently that would seek to procure those taxes from that would not impact your average taxpayer. So, capital gains, et cetera. Yeah, please.
And just because it was at the forum that we were in Plymouth, Cutler, was that his name, the
Yes.
representative? He talked about, Josh Cutler, sorry. He talked about the fair share amendment and basically using that legislation that was in there and that idea of taxing, they called it the millionaire tax. So that is one of the other ways of doing this. But they're looking at multiple different venues, but things like that, not to actually put people out, obviously been a concern.
And just in support of that, I actually have the most recent Massachusetts Association of School Committees legislative bulletin, and here it does state that the governor asserts that these reforms will assist districts in managing the rising costs of healthcare and special education for students that have already been partially addressed in recent budgets, and will provide new funding supports for EL students for the districts and higher concentration of poverty. The governor states these reforms will be funded through existing revenues.
Okay.
So the governor's proposal, he's saying he's doing it within his current revenue structure.
And just one more question. On the portion for higher education, I don't have it in front of me, was it 500 and some odd million?
74, 574.
Yes.
Are those for just public colleges, or are those for
Yes, those are public colleges in the state of Massachusetts
And
and universities.
in the big chunk, community colleges have been hurt quite a
Okay,
bit.
so it doesn't include Harvard with the $1 billion endowment and,
No, we're looking at,
We know.
like Bristol Community College, for example,
Okay.
Bridgewater State University,
Massasoit.
Massasoit State, yeah, we're public
Okay.
higher education.
all right, thank you.
Thank you.
Steph?
Thank you for bringing this to us. Appreciate it.
Thank you for listening.
Thank you. The only thing I have to add is the conference that we went to, I always go back to that, where the representative said, when we don't hear from you, we don't know what to do. So we usually act upon who we hear from. And when 2 people come in, most people don't listen. When 20 people come in, they might start to listen. when 200 people come in, they start to listen. And I think it's important that the conversations are happening, and we need to continue that push to make those conversations real. Regardless of all the pieces that are out there, something is going to happen if that push continues. And I think it's important to sign on and support this to make sure that that voice keeps being heard from, as Mr. Neef is doing, from as many sides as possible. And this list is a fantastic way to do that, because these are the people that are going to be speaking up and supporting and pushing for what needs to be the right thing to happen. And I think it's important that we sign on to make more voice, make that list go from 50 to 351, you know?
Okay.
So with that said, all those in favor of supporting?
Aye.
Aye. It's unanimous. Thank you very much. Thank you for your efforts there, too.
Thank you.
And I apologize for not making the meeting. It was very early. 5 o'clock was hard to make. I keep losing out. So we will move on to
Do you
career
wanna sign- do
pathways.
you wanna
Oh,
sign
yes.
the
Why don't
first
we do
copy of
that?
the resolution?
Yeah,
This is
please.
here.
That would be
Give Tam-
fantastic.
Give Tammy a copy.
Yep. Awesome.
Now we'll give Andrew a minute to return.
What's today? 11th.
I hate it when I'm trying to get a question out, I just stutter and stammer through the whole thing. My brain goes faster than my mouth sometimes.
That's okay. You have your name on there, too?
Tammy, I'm not gonna take it personally that you spelt my last name wrong. I made a little correction,
Thank you. Sorry about that.
so just give me a hard time.
And once Andrew signs, we'll give that copy to Tammy. What's on?
I just need to write the date next
And
to my
one,
name.
we'll keep one.
I missed it.
Sorry.
Just missed the date. Take my signature on that one. I missed it. Thank you.
Thank you again for organizing this and continuing the push for real, so anything else we can do, let us know.
At this time, I'd like to invite Mr. Schultz to come and join us. And we're going to do a presentation on career pathways, myself, Ms. Cargill, and Mr. Schultz. In November, we made a presentation about what positions and programs that we would need to add to achieve the strategic objectives outlined in our educational blueprint. One of the ideas we focused on that evening was the development of career pathways for students at the middle high school. In January, Mr. Schultz, Ms. Cargill, and I met with representatives from the Office of Career and Technical Education at the Department of Education. They were Keith Westrich, O.C. Flores, and Marnie James, to share our vision of the direction that we'd like to go in with our career pathways and see how it aligns with the state's version of career and technical education. Based on our meetings with DESE and other research, we've begun the development of the following pathways, which we're going to talk a little about tonight. Visual and performing arts, business and entrepreneurship, hospitality services, manufacturing, engineering and technology and computer sciences, wellness and municipal services, and agricultural and environmental sciences. And this all goes back to our concept of the educational blueprint, what do we want to achieve for our students. And our key strategic objectives are to support safe schools, engage the community, enhance teaching and learning, and leverage leadership policy and funding. And these strategic objectives kind of drive our decision-making throughout the district. And we believe this career and technical pathway is going to do a lot of these pieces, from engaging the community, enhancing teaching and learning, hopefully leveraging some of our policy decisions and some of the funding options that we have. So it's part of obtaining our strategic objectives. So if we teach today's students as we taught yesterday's, we rob them of tomorrow. This is from John Dewey. And that's kind of maybe our focus a little bit. Sorry, I think I'm kicking
What's
the
that
mic.
wire under there?
So our focus this evening is talk about, we don't want to teach students for what tomorrow, for what yesterday was or what today is, but we want to think about what tomorrow is going to be. And moving in the direction of career pathways, which we're going to find out through our presentation this evening, is actually also the direction that the state wants to see comprehensive high schools move in, is really focused on what are our students' needs in the future. So if you really think about it, our economy is changing, and change in our economy compels changes in education. And if you think about our educational system over time, in a lot of ways, it's always aligned to what the economy says we need. And we need to be producing students that are going to be prepared to engage in that economy 10 years from now, 20 years from now, 5 years from now. And if you look over time, that's what our educational system has done. And a lot of this comes from a presentation from Bill Daggett. Bill Daggett, the presentation Meredith and I actually saw a year ago, was entitled Educating for the Future. Bill Daggett is the founder and chairperson of the International Center for Leadership Education. He was a teacher and administrator in New York, and for many years served as the director of the New York State Education Department. He now travels throughout the country speaking about what education needs to look like in the future. And during his presentation, so the next couple of slides come right from his presentation, so I want to give Bill Daggett credit. They were distributed to those who attended, and we are allowed to use them. But he focused on this concept of that over time, within the world, we've gone through 4 what we call industrial revolutions. And those industrial revolutions have really dictated in some ways what education looks like, saying that in many ways education is always responding to the demands of society and what society needs. The first industrial revolution was steam and water power. The second was the age of science and mass production. The third was the digital age, and the fourth we're moving into. Now, if you look back at this historically, the Industrial Revolution for steam and water power probably began in the late 1700s and lasted almost to 1900. It was over 120 years. Then we shifted into mass production, which was probably 1900, still lasted another 90 years, really into the 80s or 90s, which led to all the manufacturing jobs that existed within the United States of America, especially after World War II. You had the boom in the economies in the 50s, 60s, 70s, and 80s, and we became a manufacturing society based on mass production. In our school system, what Bill Daggett would argue, and I guess I'm saying I'm arguing as well, is that in many ways our school system is still modeled towards that society, preparing people to be mass producers. But our industry is shifting away from that. The third industrial revolution probably began in the 1990s, what he would call the digital age. And Bill Daggett would argue is actually ending right now. We're in the beginning of transitioning from digital technology industrial revolution to what is known as the nano or biotechnology revolution, which really gets into robotics and nanotechnology. Nano is a measurement. It means 1/billionth. So a nano is 1/billionth of a centimeter. So that's very small, if you think about that. And ultimately the whole concept being, if you think about electronics and our industrial capacity is starting to work around the concept of the nano, and that they can put so much technology and so much information in such a small piece of such small devices that the computing power of You always see, I actually heard this on the news the other day, the computing power in anyone's iPhone is 100 times stronger than the computing power that existed on the spaceship that went to the moon, the Apollo missions. And that just keeps exponentially happening at a faster rate. And the other thing you notice about these industrial revolutions, they're also beginning to happen at an exponentially faster rate. So 50 years ago, it was okay to prepare people for a society because there was a good chance that 30 years it was going to look very similar. But things are rapidly evolving that we need to adjust to that. So ultimately, the Industrial Revolution transformed both expectations and models of public education. But the question would be, are we behind? Are we really starting to prepare students for that nano-biotechnology revolution? Are we preparing students to be active and productive citizens in that society, the society that's starting to exist now? Meredith and I went back and forth a little bit in terms of, there's all kinds of videos out there in terms of, we could have showed you all kinds of videos tonight about some of the crazy things that are being done from, houses that are being produced by 3D printers. And that they can produce a house in 24 hours on a 3D printer. And it's pretty amazing when you pull up those videos and watch some of that stuff that's happening. And that's what we need to start preparing students for. The other piece of that is our focus here is going to be being the concept of college and career ready. And there used to be a little bit of discussion of college or career ready, that you're preparing students for a career or for college. And the focus even from DESE's language is now, it shouldn't be college or career ready, it should be college and career ready. We should be preparing our students in a high school setting that they could walk out of that high school and go to college or go into a career or do both. And I don't know if that's always been our thought process in terms of the model of education. I think sometimes we've been stratified a little bit of this student's going to go to a 4-year college, this student's going to go to a 2-year college, this student's going to go to work or go to the military. And ultimately, our focus needs to shift on, we want everyone to be able to prepare to do either of those things, and maybe both, college and career. And more and more, if you look over time, there's been a question about, are high schools really preparing students to go to college or a career? And when you look at college dropout rates, you can see that. So college dropout rate, first or second year. Okay? At 4-year colleges, it's a third. A third of students going to a 4-year college drop out in their first or second year. And going to 2-year college, and this isn't Massachusetts, this isn't Carver students, this is just the national statistic. This is what happens nationally. And students going to a 2-year college, 44.5% of them drop out within 1 year, within their first or second year. If you do the same thing, graduation rate, the average college graduation rate from 1983 to 2016 for a 4-year college is, sorry, I didn't advance my own slide. I didn't look up there. Is 36.6% graduate a 4-year college in 5 years, and 29.1% graduate a 2-year college in 3 years. So these statistics belie that concept of, we need to be preparing students to both be college and career ready. We need to do a better job having them be ready to go to college. We also have to do a better job to have them prepared to go into a career and make the right choice in terms of what's that thing doing coming out of high school. Do you want to go into a career-focused area? Do you want to go to college, or do you want to be able to do both? And ultimately, our whole concept of developing career pathways is going to be based on that concept of making students college and career ready. In Massachusetts, 4-year public colleges, the graduation rate in 6 years is 56.4%. In 4 years is 35.4%. So again, only a little over a third of students who enter a 4-year public college in Massachusetts graduate within 4 years. So we need to do a better job preparing our students. On that same concept, what are people looking for? Okay. So this is from Future of Jobs report and from the World Economic Forum. It outlines what businesses and what industry is saying are the top 10 skills that we're looking for in employees. Complex problem solving, critical thinking, creativity, people management, coordinating with others, emotional intelligence, intelligence, active listening, service orientation, negotiation, cognitive flexibility. Now, if you look at a lot of those skills are people-based. A lot of those skills are being able to communicate with others. Now, some of those skills underline specific academic content. I would argue that all the academic content that we're teaching within our schools is helping develop complex problem solving and critical thinking. It should be. So the academic rigor that our students are engaged in, especially at the high school level, should really focus around that concept of really what we're teaching in this class is critical thinking skills. And then we might be using math or science or history or comprehensive health or whatever we're doing as our vehicle. But the skill we're learning is to be critical thinkers. The skill we're learning is to be complex problem solvers, which is listening as the top two. But if you really even think about some of the other things we talked about in terms of, I'm spraying a little bit, but in terms of promoting safe schools and all the social emotional learning pieces we've been looking at as a district and talking about, a lot of those kind of what might be softer skills are on this list. Just this weekend, I was listening to a news story and a report about what our employer is looking for, and that whole concept of content versus social emotional skills. And it was leaning towards employers saying, I want students who have strong social emotional skills. I can teach them the content, but I want them to be able to work with people, interact with people, be effective. And these are all types of things, this whole concept of enforcing these top 10 skills. We feel like we can do a better job of this by having a little more focus in terms of developing this concept of career pathways for students. We want students thinking, once they enter high school, how can I get myself to be college and career ready? How can maybe I start to identify some direction in terms of where I want to go? And what coursework, what classes, what skills, what can I be involved in at the high school level that's going to support me when I come out of school to be able to do these 10 things, and then also maybe have a direction in terms of where I'm looking to go, either in terms of colleges or career. And that's kind of the underpinning of our whole concept of developing college and career pathways. And with that, I'm going to turn it over to Mr. Schultz to talk a little bit more specifically about the pathways that really he's taken the lead in terms of developing and designing. And he can talk to you a little bit about some of the work he's done this year in terms of visiting some other schools and getting some ideas. And then talk about these pathways and the beginning work we've done to flesh them out. What would they actually look like? What would be the coursework? What would be the sequencing? How would we try to implement this within the Carver Public Schools and at Carver Middle High School?
So I've had an interest in this part of education for a while, in that in our district and in other districts, I think that we sometimes forget to look at those students that aren't going to the military, that aren't going to college, 1 or 2 or 4 year schools, and where are they going and what are they doing? The other thing that's happened, I think, in our district is through budget cuts and through some tough fiscal times, we've eliminated a lot of electives that typically would guide students in different directions. Currently we have a few electives that are left, but certainly doesn't really guide us into certain career pathways and directions. So I've had an interest in this for a while, and as being an athletic director, I have the ability to work with 10 different schools in our league. So a lot of times our monthly meetings are around not just planning sports activities and events and games, but we share ideas and concepts that other districts are doing. So I got to talking with Mashpee in particular, and they're similar to us in terms of size. They're similar to us in terms of being a 7-12 middle high school, under one principal. And they were losing students to voc programs. They're on the Cape, so the Cape is the Wild West. You can go one school one day, one year, the next school the next. It's school choice all over the place. And they were losing a good 60 to 70% of their students to different schools, different programs, et cetera. So they took a hard look at themselves in 2013, I believe, and started to create this concept of career pathways. And basically the idea is they wanted to provide students career opportunities beyond the classroom, and they wanted to put students down different pathways and giving them exposure. Fast forward to now, we're realizing now that the state is also on board with this, and we're sort of trying to merge the concept of what the state is doing, which we'll share with you a little later, and sort of these pathways that we've learned from visiting other schools. These pathways are right now just conceptual. Basically, the ones that are listed there, I won't read them for you, but those are pathways that are combined with concepts and needs, I think, in our area, and specifically Carver, Plymouth, this area, and some of what Mashpee has done in terms of specifically manufacturing, engineering, technology, computer science. That is a big part of their Career Pathways program, along with the other ones that are there. So we took, myself and Mr. Roder, who's our technology engineering teacher at the middle high school, as you know, 6 through 8, I think one of our biggest challenges with the technology engineering program, 6 through 8, is that it is 6 through 8. It stops once we get to 9th grade. That's a big void we need to fill in order to keep this pathway, this concept going, and we've got some ideas and things in place through support of other disciplines. Matt's picked up a big part of this with Bootstrap and computer science, and there's opportunities with science to take on some of the allied health, biomedical stuff. So these pathways were conceptual, and if we go to the next slide, Meredith, I can kind of explain sort of what we've started to do. So basically, I took the concept of Mashpee, and I created, looking at our need and looking at the classes we offer, I created these 6 pathways. And if you look within the pathways, the first thing that I did was I went through our current program of studies. And all those classes that you see listed there are either electives or programs that I thought would connect to one of the pathways. So that is current courses that we offer, and I've sort of dropped them into a category. If you scroll down to the next section, this is just, again, it's a blueprint document that I created to sort of gather information. It does have some timeline stuff on it. It has years of implementation, but it's conceptual in terms of what are we offering, what are we not. This next cluster, and you guys have them on your computer right now, but the next cluster of classes, I basically took some of the list of information from Mashpee and then other classes that we felt we could add to this blueprint. So this is a list of all the classes that would fall under another cluster based on visiting other schools and conceptual thinking. And then if you scroll down through this, so again, we've gone through this whole concept where the next thing you have is potential internships that would relate to it. How can we connect to the community? One of the ways that Mashpee was able to roll this out. So now if they started in 2013, they're 5 years into their Pathways program, and it's very well established. And they're very proud of it. They should be. They do tours a lot for the state and with other school districts. And you walk around, they have a whole Career Pathways wing, and you walk into this wing of their building, and it is one big makerspace. So you've got, literally have students working from one room to the other. Some of the cool things they're doing is they have a robotics lab similar to our robotics club, but their robotics lab is basically that robotics club during the day. So they have their forum set up and they're working it. They're building their models, they're building concepts, and then they're connecting to the elementary school. So the elementary school kids were designing, when we were there, they were working with the high school kids designing submarines. So they were learning the way submarines go through the water. They were designing the actual structure of the submarines through different types of materials that were given to them. The high school kids were then making them work. So they were putting the engines in them, and they were designing the concept of building them. And then together they were putting them in tanks and using them. They have one of the most expensive and I guess one of the biggest printing concepts or printing programs on the Cape. And they do printing for other school districts. They do printing for all of the town material. They do printing for, they do their own yearbooks. So they've picked up the printing field and they've made it their own in terms of teaching students concepts. That type of work goes on as you walk through this wing of the building. It's pretty impressive. They've got a full-blown restaurant in there. Remember, they're not a Voc school. They're a comprehensive high school, just like us. They're a high school that we're able to take these concepts and pathways fit them into their curriculum. And there are kids who are going to math class and then they jump into their technology program. They've got a digital media program that's doing digital media designs. Their tech program is pretty impressive. They use 3D animation. The kids are doing gaming. A lot of the classes are designed to have multiple grade levels. So I was in a class, a technology class, they were doing entry-level stuff on CAD design. So kids were doing CAD models and basically floor plans, orthographic drawings, next to a kid who was a senior doing 3D animation and design work. And people say, well, how does that work? Well, the kid who's more advanced would just look over to the kid next to him, make a few adjustments on his thing, and they're working together. So multiple skill levels in one room. Their animation, everything that they designed is current to industry standards. So we're not teaching them a basic CAD drawing that when they graduate, they have to relearn it in the field. Everything they do is field related. So they're using Fusion 360, which I don't really know a lot about, but it's the same type of software that if you were going to an engineering firm or to a software firm, you'd have an understanding of that. And a lot of their programs are based on certifications, so they're getting Safe Serve certifications in their culinary program and so forth. Pretty impressive, but it's all housed in a separate wing. It is their Pathways wing, and it is a ongoing sort of interrelated group. So if you want to design something in the wood lab, you may go to the computer lab, work with a few kids, and then rebuild this sign that is used for the community. So community members go in and you design signs for stores and stuff. So they're really creative. One of the cool things they did, and I don't know if Mr. Neef had shared this with you, but they approached Mashpee Commons. Anybody know Mashpee Commons? It's sort of a high-end shopping center in Mashpee. And the director of the program said, you've got some open storefronts. And he said, I'd like to see if we can explore taking on a storefront. They gave him a storefront for a month as an exploratory, see what happens. They're still there a year and a half to 2 years later. So they've got a store in Mashpee Commons, and what they do is they showcase their stuff. They sell their equipment, but the kids manage it. The kids do the website, the kids do the inventory, the kids do the buying and selling, purchasing and sales. It's all this concept of building a community, getting the community involved. One of the cool things they do at their restaurant is they hold selectmen's meetings and they hold school committee meetings, and the kids cater it, and it's open to the public, and they showcase not only their culinary expertise, but all the artwork and all the projects that they do. So it's really a community-supported program that's working in interconnecting with the students and the community, and they benefit from it. So one of the things that we started to do is I took a program that I thought would be the easiest one to sort of model, because we're probably the furthest along, and that is our culinary program. As you guys know, Chef Portalance has been extremely successful with that program, and a lot of what he does is based on the ProStart program that he's doing. So if you click on the HS, Meredith, each one of these tabs on the bottom, we started to sort of design what it would look like. So again, current program is what we offer is an intro to culinary, which I believe is an 8th grade program. We offer a culinary arts program for 11th and 12th grade students. It's a full year program. We offer an advanced culinary program, and then we do this 10-minute meals thing. These are all junior and senior electives with the exception of the intro to culinary. What we'd like to do in terms of a hospitality pathway is, if you go down, this was created by Chef Portalance, and it's basically it's based around the concept of having a restaurant in our building. So we would have a restaurant in our building, and we would have ProStart 1 and 2, which is a nationally recognized program with certifications that go with it, and articulations with colleges all across the country. And then we would get into a culinary 1, an advanced culinary 1, and advanced culinary 2. And that would be your year 3 and 4. And again, the concept is each one of these classes is a full year class, 1 period a day, and it puts you down a culinary pathway, or a hospitalities pathway, but within the field of culinary. And then within that, there would be internship opportunities. There are other programs that are associated with that. But the concept is when the student leaves the culinary program, they would have the same training or the ability to get the same type of job as a vocational student that's going to a vocational program within the public school setting. That was probably the easiest one to demonstrate because we're further along. As you get into the other ones, it's really building. I mean, we're really starting in some ways from scratch, other than we have electives within the building or classes within the building that would support it. That's kind of prerequisites. So that was the sort of the concept around the pathways, and we've been working on this since the fall to continue to build this. And then we met with the state, and it seems as though, as Mr. Neve said, the state is also on board, where they're saying that there is going to be Chapter 70 potential additional funding if you can designate a pathway within your public school through either Chapter 74, innovation, or college and ready, which is sort of the next thing we're talking about.
So we'll go to Matt.
All right, thank you. So as Mike described that, he said that there really is kind of a three-pronged road that the state is looking to incentivize for students. So the opportunities that are focused really around kind of a traditional career and technical education is called Chapter 74. And held within that, there's a variety of standards that we would meet. Mike gave the example for culinary about ProStart 1, ProStart 2, and Chef really worked with the standards that exist for a Chapter 74 program to make sure that that alignment was there, that we were compliant, and more importantly, that we were leveraging solid opportunities for students to move into industry after they completed their education here. The other two that the state is looking at are called Innovation and Early College Pathways. And all three of these programs are really built off of 5 guiding principles. One is equitable access. So they want to make sure that all populations have the opportunity to attain more education after high school graduation, whether it be through trade schools, community colleges, apprenticeships, or a traditional kind of 4-year trajectory. They wanted to eliminate any barriers and then to make sure that the quality of academics is such that it really does prepare students. So Scott mentioned the importance of the soft skills that are now called employability skills that industry and the private sector are looking for. We also look for those in the classroom. We want students who can persist and who can be creative. Ideally, with these programs, as Scott mentioned, the state is no longer looking at an either-or scenario. They're looking at what they call and both. So the idea is that students will have both the academic preparation and the career knowledge or the hands-on experience while they're in high school to be prepared for career opportunities. They want to make sure that there are wraparound services to promote success so that our dropout rates or a decision to maybe leave a pathway is not done in haste, that students really have the opportunity to try on different careers. And then lastly, that schools can partner not only with colleges in the area, but really look at local businesses. So one example of that is Mike and I attended a regional economic development board recently, and they were talking about manufacturing opportunities in the area. And they've spent a lot of time working with the state and looking at the career sector and where the Plymouth Carver area is going to go in the next 5 to 10 to 15 years. They've done all sorts of different meta-analyses, and they've been able to say these are the areas that we really need students to focus on so that we can continue to grow our workforce and have those opportunities. One of those opportunities is called the Innovation Pathway. And the idea behind this is to take maybe the traditional set of college skills that students have and marry that with application. And so coming from a curriculum and instruction standpoint, I am very excited about this because we know that hands-on experiences and being able to apply our knowledge allows us to have some permanence. We're able to master those concepts. And so the state has said that in the upcoming year that they're really looking at these different areas: manufacturing, information technology, environmental and life sciences, healthcare and social assistance, and then business and finance. And within that, students that might choose for one of their 3 roads, the innovation road, what they would do is they would start as freshmen And they would have the opportunity not only to take the traditional high school classes that they take, but they would have to agree to take 2 college level classes or classes that have that level of rigor. So that could include dual enrollment, Project Lead the Way, advanced placement courses. We already offer a number of those. It would also allow us to have students be involved in 2 technical courses that really look at a broad overview of experiences within the industry. So if they're in the manufacturing strand, they may be able to not only look at what manufacturing is, but maybe look at the physics of manufacturing and what happens to metal when it's welded or when it's heated up. And so right there, it's lending a lot of application to what they learn in their physics classes. Likewise, they can look at all different aspects of that career, from marketing to finance to human resource, human management, that piece of thing. And then the last part, is that they would engage in a 100-hour internship or a capstone project that would allow them to have that signified on their transcript that they had gone through an innovation pathway and that they had developed some employability skills and some real-world competencies that they could take either into the manufacturing industry or off to college, with the idea that they had these chances to do this. They had toured local facilities, they had met with leadership in that industry, and that they had a broader understanding of the way that education can prepare you for innovation. The next piece that they are trying to encourage is something called early college. And so where Mike looked at Chapter 74 and I looked at innovation, Scott was able to look at early college.
So for the early college pathway, the goal is to blend elements of high school and college and provide opportunity for students to experience some complete college-level coursework. Ultimately, to be accepted as an early college pathway, you have to offer 12 college credits in high school. So the student would complete high school having completed 12 college credits. You'd enter into a partnership with a local community college. That community college would either offer the courses in your building, or you would have to provide dual enrollment opportunities for students to go and take the courses at their buildings. And the idea being that they would have 12 credits completed. And the thought process behind that is twofold. One is by completing the courses early and getting the exposure, they're saying that's going to help students make that transition into college and be successful. And the focus here really is really all students. You know, a student might be thinking, I'm going to go to a 2-year community college, then it might actually make sense for them to be enrolled in this early college pathway, more so than the student who's your valedictorian, in terms of making that transition. And you would have some flexibility in terms of whether you establish a sequence. Some schools who've started to do this, they just put out the first grants for these. And schools have started to do this. They've actually established a 12-credit pathway. And they said, it's all gonna be business courses. It's all gonna be geared towards a specific career. And that student would almost go and complete some of their graduate requirements for a degree, an associate's degree, in high school. Ultimately, we've been in communication with, right now, Massasoit, and Massasoit has been identified as an early college pathway school. So we've begun some early discussions with them about offering some of these opportunities and the cost structure around it. We're going to at least begin broaching into this, and this is going to tie into our next presentation a little bit, but we've put into the budget next year $1,500 to provide 10 students the opportunity to take a dual enrollment course paid for by the district. So the requirement of this early college pathway is that this would not be, the students don't pay for the courses. So these courses have to be paid for either by the school district or through grant funding. We're going to talk about this in a second. I'm getting a little bit of ahead. But each one of these pathways have seed money. There's a grant process that you can apply for a grant through the state. It's a 2-part process. There's like a pre-screening application. Then once you get pre-screened, you go to a full grant. And if you receive the grant, it provides the seed money to start these projects up. The schools that who've been designated as early college pathways, they're actually giving them a decent amount of money to actually pay for those tuition costs to have the courses offered at their school. Now, that's not going to pay for that forever, but it's going to start that process of paying for those courses and offering them either at your school or on site. And Massasoit's a good partner for us, just because they now have a campus in Middleborough. So the Middleborough campus is fairly close. Doesn't mean we couldn't look at other partners. Cape Cod's an option. There's other options we could begin to look at. But
It's a partnership with one community.
yeah, you're supposed to partner with a community college, and you apply together. So when you actually go into the grant process, and when you go through the process to be accepted as an early college pathway, to have your kids identified that way, you would actually do it with the community college you're going to pair with.
Didn't we used to do stuff with?
We did stuff with Cape Cod through dual enrollment, and that's the interesting part. That was all grant funded. At that time, Cape Cod had a national grant on the same concept here. It was before this was accepted, before this early college pathway had been rolled out by the state. This is fairly new within the last couple of years, last 2 years really. So we were doing prior to that. Cape Cod had a federal grant, and they paid for the teacher to instruct the courses, and we applied for a Makepeace grant that paid for all the students' texts and supplies. So students were able to take courses free of charge at Carver High School for approximately, did it for about 2 years, and after about 2 years, the grant funding ran out. We used all of our Makepeace funds. The federal government didn't continue their grant on the same concept, and when the grant funding dried up, our student interest in taking the courses diminished. So, in terms of bringing this back, I think, and actually, like I said, from the state end, to actually be identified as an early college pathway, it has to be of no charge to the students. And then Mike's going to talk about the third pathway. So we have innovation, early college, and Chapter 74.
So Chapter 74, and as we look at these, there was definitely overlap between Chapter 74 pathway and innovation pathway, and you'll see an overlap in terms of what they offer. But one of the things sort of identified here is the term all aspects of industry, according to the Mass Vocational Technical Educational Frameworks, talks about the term means occupational safety and health, technical, embedded academic employability, management and entrepreneurship, and technological knowledge and skills that must be taught to all students in districts receiving state and federal aid. So that's sort of the overarching theme of what a vocational Chapter 74 pathway looks like. What the state is doing, which is what Meredith and I went and observed at Socio Votech, is Mass Hire is creating these clusters. There's a cluster in hospitality and tourism, manufacturing, engineering. And these clusters are sort of being developed by Mass Hire with local businesses to help support the need of whatever the industry may be. So their first one that they've sort of rolled out is this manufacturing, engineering, technology cluster. And, you would get on board with them and you would get your students sort of affiliated with the manufacturing, engineering, technology. What I thought was interesting about the presentation that we had is that we were there with a bunch of other school districts, guidance counselors, principals, superintendents, but there was also members of different companies. Tech Etch, which is a local company in the area, they were there, and a few other, I'm going to say it wrong, but Zildjian.
Yeah.
So the local businesses have partnered with Mass Hire. And what was interesting is one of the women spoke about her connection to manufacturing, and when she left, which is what a lot of our kids do, when they leave high school, I have kids say this to me all the time, people keep asking me what I'm going to do when I graduate, and I don't know what I'm going to do. This particular person, who's now I think she's the vice president of human relations or human resources for one of the big companies, she said, I was that person. So I could have gone down the path of going to a four-year college, doing the traditional path, investing a lot of money, but not knowing what I want to do. So she got involved in manufacturing and didn't realize that there were so many different layers to manufacturing, even to which she's now the vice president of human resources. So these clusters are designed to help kids be exposed to all the little aspects of that particular field. One of the things a lot of the clusters will do, and a lot of the pathway work will give you a certification within that particular field. And there's a lot of internship, job shadowing, job placement opportunities through these type of clusters, because you're not only doing the work in the class, in the school, but you're getting out into the community and you're making connections with local businesses and industry. So we started looking at again, this is an application process. It's two-part. It's pretty involved. But again, if you can designate your students down one of the state pathways, obviously there's a financial benefit for us, but it's also helping students make those decisions when they graduate. And again, as we looked at the pathways that the state have identified, and we now sort of go back to that original blueprint that I was talking about at the very beginning, there are definitely parallels. So our next step would be, we probably would want to look at each one of those pathways that we sort of designated in the beginning of the presentation and say, you know, is this a Chapter 74? Is this innovation? Is this college and career ready? But it's interesting and exciting that the state is on board with this. I think that we, as a district, have an obligation to kind of go down this path of pathways and supporting students as they graduate, so that there's more opportunities.
So, and just to reiterate that, when we went and met with the representatives from the Office of Career and Technical Education from the Department of Education, they really said to us, "You're right where we want you to be, and this is where the state's going to support." So schools that are going to move in this direction, you're going to see support of these programs, because we believe in these career pathways, and we believe in this concept of ensuring students are college and career ready. So in terms of, you know, possible funding, there's some different pieces out there. Mass Hire has a regional workforce board which can provide funds to districts to build programs. The grant applications for designation as early college innovation pathway are Chapter 74 by DESE. So as we go through those grant applications, there is money available to start these programs up and get them off the ground. In the governor's proposed budget, and we had this discussion about budgets and where it's going, currently in the governor's budget, it's for every program that you have designated as an innovation program or as an early college program, there is additional Chapter 78 per student, of over $1,000. So if we were to go forward in 2 years and have something approved as an innovation program, as through the innovation pathway, and we said we had 35 students involved in that pathway, which would identify through our SIMS data to DESE, then we would get an increase in, you know, $35,000 in terms of our Chapter 70 funding. Now, as Brad would say, that would probably just goes to our held harmless concept, which we've talked about a little bit. I don't know if we need to go through that tonight. But bottom line is, any of that movement in that direction helps us. So having those pathways identified would be beneficial for us. Chapter 74 already has a funding mechanism. If you have a Chapter 74 approved program, you already receive more Chapter 70 funding that already exists. Innovation Early College doesn't exist yet, but it's in the governor's proposed budget. There's also, we're not going to talk much about this concept of Project Lead the Way, but there's another grant opportunity for us where we might be able to get some monies to support. And there's 2 other grants out there called the Skills for Youth and Capital Skills grants that we're looking at. So there's a lot of grant funding out there right now to support the beginning of these programs. And we're going to look to go after some of those monies. Next steps for us. Now we feel strongly that adding a technology teacher at the middle high school is an important next step. We think that position can help play a role in developing the engineering, the technological components of our pathways. So the example being, for example, right, you know, we use Chef as the example. So we have an expert in that field who is prepared to help develop that pathway. We feel like a technology teacher, that was the key role that Mashpee did use. They brought someone as a technology teacher who had an expertise to help build out the pathways. And we'd be looking to do that as well, to bring someone who has the expertise in some of those technical programs that we need to bring that into the building. We want to continue to work on building pathways, and I put develop teams to design pathways. That's actually a requirement of the grants. So if we're gonna go for an innovations grant or for a Chapter 74 grant, we have to actually develop a school-based team that helps develop the grant. Our goal would be to apply for an innovations pathway and a Chapter 74 program designation with DESE next year. So we'd like to identify one innovation pathway and one Chapter 74 program. The Chapter 74 program would be the culinary, And we looked at the timeline for that, for the Part A, the first part of the grant application, it's through the end of October. So our goal would be that by the end of October next year, we'd be in position to complete the application for Chapter 7, begin the process of applying for one Chapter 74 program, one innovation pathway. We haven't identified the innovation pathway as of yet, but obviously we'll be doing that this spring. We are going to investigate Project Lead the Way. Meredith, I don't know if you want to talk more about Project Lead the Way, just to give a little background on that, because we've thrown it in there a couple times. We actually have a representative from Project Lead the Way coming out to meet with us in a couple weeks.
Yep. So there was $1 million grant fund that went to Project Lead the Way about 2 years ago. And essentially, it's a national program, but there is a state lead at each level. And so the Massachusetts lead is going to come and meet with our department chairs and with Mike Scott and I about what is involved. But there are modules that have been highly vetted and juried that work in a project-based learning format so that students are able to work through the modules and gain support in content that aligns well with pathways. So the biomedical Project Lead the Way all supports the health sciences and allied arts and some of the pieces that we're looking at.
And if you went for like an innovation pathway, those would be accepted as advanced coursework. So if you were in a Project Lead the Way program and were utilizing their courses, that would be identified as matching that concept of having 2 college level courses in the innovation pathway as we go for that application. And, and then last thing is obviously we want to continue kind of develop this out into a 5-year plan. Develop a specific 5-year plan of, this is our timeline of when we might apply for, when we're going to design and implement our pathways, and where we may look to apply for Chapter 74 or innovation pathways through DESE. So that's kind of that was a long summary of the work we've done so far with Career Pathways. I do want to thank Meredith and Mike. They've really put a lot of time into this. So Mike's really taken the lead at the building-based level in terms of developing the pathways and thinking about it conceptually. And Meredith has clearly been a support for that. Right now, those 2 have been our leaders in the district in this movement. And I just want to thank them for all the time and energy they've put into it. And our next step is going to we have to build that out and develop a team of teachers, administrators in the community in terms of going forward and developing some of these pathways.
Mike, you just
There's
have
no
to,
action per se, just any questions you might have.
you have to, we had to request you to share that, open that document, that sheet for us.
We can do it on my computer.
All right, yeah, we couldn't open it up, just so we can take a look at that, see what you got
Okay.
done so
Yep.
far.
I think I can do that for you too.
I would just have 2 comments, and I think this looks great. And the first would be when that bootstrap presentation came in. I mean, I know their state's saying we're where we need to be, but I think we're really far behind in technology and where we need to be. And I think we need to start treating code like French and Spanish and the things that we need to do to get these kids up in the language that they're going to be using more often than not. And secondly, I think we need to get on this track, and this is great that you guys are doing this, because I don't want to misquote in any way, but I do remember seeing our partners in education, Old Colony, at the last selectmen's meeting, promoting how their vocational school is also college preparatory and ready for that. So they're out there marketing themselves. Mm-hmm. And our goal and what our push has been is to try and keep the students here and keep them where we want them. And having somebody, students in the school, there's a lot of conversation about Old Colony that goes around this time of year when they get ready for their visits and those things happen. So I think this is a great step to start doing something to show that we're working to keep the kids here and give them what they need.
Yep. And I would agree with you in terms of the coding and the programming piece. I wasn't trying to say like we were ahead of the curve.
And I know that.
What I was trying to say was, that I think from the DESE standpoint, they were saying that there are some districts that aren't even thinking in this direction yet. And their goal of, the reason why they've created these whole 3 pathways and are beginning to fund them is they're saying to school districts, we want you to start thinking this way. So they were saying, we were happy to hear that that's the way you're thinking, because this is the push that's going to come out of the Department of Education of, we want all high schools to start thinking this way. And we're going to put some money behind it to do that. But I would agree that not having the technology teach, which has been a budget cut in the past, it has been detrimental to us, and we need to build up some of those programs, and this is part of that.
Well, and it's a shift for everybody right now, because as we've had the discussion before, we've lost a lot of technology at the high school due to inadequate systems. You know, they become outdated. And that's a constant fun to try and keep up with that, and technology changes so fast these days that the ability to keep up with that is difficult. So any kind of pathway and plan that we set in that
We don't know when the
direction
fifth
really-
industrial, we don't know when the fifth industrial revolution is
Yeah,
going to happen. We're
exactly,
just
yeah, you
transitioning
know?
to the fourth. Who knows
Right?
when the fifth one's going to come?
But this is very well presented, so thank you very much for all your work in this direction. Much appreciated.
And obviously, we'll keep you updated as we move forward, as we start to look at these grants, as we develop a team to identify the pathways. When you're able to get into that document, you can see that it's been pretty comprehensive in some of the thought that's gone in, specifically into the development of the hospitality services pathway.
Get onto the Project Lead the Way site. That one will link up, the other one will link up. Does anyone have any questions for me?
Yeah, I got a couple. I know that Michael and I have actually talked about this for years. So to get to this point, to see it here, congrats for pushing this. This has my full support. I am totally behind this. I have for years known that this was a hole, and the fact that you have a vision to fill it is awesome. So anything that we can do, I will be a full proponent on getting that done. I want to talk a little bit about implementation. You mentioned about Mashpee and what they've done, and I kind of feel like we're kind of taking the roadmap from them and going to run with it. Is that probably?
Yeah, I mean, that's the
Okay.
one school that we've seen it fully implemented. There are a few others that Meredith has been able to track down.
What was their implementation time in Ashburn?
Full program, I would say, you know, they're 5 years in and still tweaking, but I would say it was probably a good 3 or 4 years. I mean, I'm seeing 5 years of work.
When they made tweaks, so you mentioned clusters, right? We didn't have the document, so I'm just going off.
Yep.
You mentioned clusters. How do you figure out what cluster best fits your kids in your school?
So the cluster thing is something that the state has identified. So basically, they've identified the clusters that kind of tie into what our pathways are, but the clusters and pathways are sort of different. The cluster is something that the state is creating based on what they're hearing from the workforce, is it redevelopment board, workforce redevelopment board, Mass Hire?
Yes, Mass Hire.
So they're basically going out to the community and saying, what is your need? What are these businesses and what is your need? The interesting thing, and I can share the document with you, it was a brochure that they gave us. And what it did in the brochure was it basically took the cluster and it listed all the potential career pathways within manufacturing, for example. And then it allowed you to see what an entry-level manufacturing job was, what the pay rate was, what the benefits were, what the jobs were. Second level, entering with the 2-year degree, the job potential, the payment. It was just a very well done document outlining how far along you can get through these clusters. So the clusters are state-driven. They're designed by the state through work with the Mass Hire and local businesses and schools.
So do I have this right? If they would come out maybe in 2020 and say, you would look to implement this in 2022 and give you the reasons, the vision behind where things are going, and that's where, because they want to give you adequate time to get the funding and get everything rolling to get that next group, right?
They've
Yeah.
done that.
Yes.
So they went through essentially, and they're regional. So every community in the Commonwealth is assigned to one of these regional Mass Hire boards. It used to be called Workforce Development. And they've done that for their region, their catchment area. They've gone through and kind of chronicled what the trends are in terms of employment. And then they've projected out through 2022 and have said, these are the things that we want to see in terms of a connection between economy and education. So they're looking for these kind of well-etched pathways to help feed any turnover, any sort of regional specifics in terms of industry. So what you might see here compared to the Berkshires would be different.
Gotcha.
And I'm not committing to this, but my guess is if we were going to apply for a Chapter 74 program, it would be culinary. I think if we were going to apply for an innovation program, I think it would be manufacturing at this point. I'm guessing, if we can put the things in place. But within that manufacturing cluster, they help you sort of design the program and the classes that you can offer. Because, I mean, the list of opportunities within manufacturing in terms of job and career is enormous.
And the last thing I'll have, and I know you're not gonna have this off top of your heads, but the people that have implemented this, what was their enrollment before, and what is it after?
So I can speak to that about Mashpee, because one of the things about Mashpee is, again, they were like us in a lot of ways in terms of the size of their building, the number of kids who were leaving to go to different programs, their, dropout, enrollment, graduation rate, the number of kids that are going to a 2-year school, a 4-year school. The parallels were really big. I mean, we had a lot of things in common. They had a lot more kids leaving because of school choice, but basically they told me that at this point, 5 years later, they used to have 60 to 70 kids leave the district over the course of the time, and they've been able to retain that. So they've got another 60 to 70 kids that they've been able to retain because of the programs they're offering. And some of the programs they're offering are a lot more advanced than some of the vocational programs that the kids are going to. So these are really innovative programs in terms of the technology piece of things. So that's been the benefit for them in terms of retaining staff, big time.
Andy kicked it out.
Oh, yeah. He's having to grab the one right over there.
Come on.
So yeah, they have some, I could get the information for you, but they have some real data in terms of retaining students. A fairly good number.
And I just linked at the bottom in the background, at the bottom of the notes, I linked in
Yeah,
the
it's a
Pathways
document.
document. You should be able to open that now. Yeah, you should be able to open it now.
Thanks.
Any others?
This is excellent, thank you. All of you for all of your hard work. It's very exciting and
Keep us
wonderful
updated.
opportunity. Yeah,
Yeah.
absolutely.
For the presentation. I have actually have two questions. One is, this starts from someone that goes in as a freshman. What if there's someone, a student that makes their mind up as a sophomore? Can they get into the program then, or?
Yeah, so one of the things that we have to build out as we do this is we want to make sure that the career pathways are very clearly established in guidance and sort of, what was that, we called it, like a
MyCap.
MyCap. So students are identifying through the work with guidance a pathway, but if they choose to change pathways along the way, they would definitely be able to have kids transition from one to the other, because some of the coursework is going to be similar. And a lot of them are sort of parallel to.
And I don't think it's going to be, conceptually in our minds, it's not going to be as confined as maybe a vocational school. Where you go to that vocational school and you do your exploratory, then you, in 10th grade, you sign on, and if you look to change 11th grade, now you're in a little bit of trouble because you've gone a different direction. So it's not, so it's not going to be that rigid in terms of structure. It'll have a little more fluidity to it.
The other thing is the state does require guidance to be heavily involved. They have a specific
Aren't they
training.
running- Don't we run a program now, like they came and presented that we're doing something anyway, right?
So we've started to, yes, and we definitely have like the background software. We utilize it for our students that the state wants us to use. They just have, in order for us to be eligible for these grants, there are things that we need to comply with. And one of those is to do something called a MyCap, which just kind of do what we would do anyways for students, which is map out what your 4 years are. But I would agree with Mr. Neef that it's not as confined as it sounds. And really the end game is career exploration and enough exposure to careers and enough applicable experience. So actually applying knowledge that when students leave, they can access a bunch of different options within a career.
And we're also trying to get more opportunities at the 8th grade level and more exposure. So they're getting taste of different fields. So hopefully by the time they're in 9th grade, they go down a path. And a lot of these pathways we created have a lot of career options within them. So they're not confined to sort of this one, like electrical or plumbing or whatever. So you've got a lot of leeway within the pathways, but you could definitely change lanes.
One of the things as you were speaking there, you mentioned the culinary as a focus, and that makes sense for Carver. But one of the other things, fields I was thinking about was in the health field and, say, nursing or LPN, RN degrees. I knew several young ladies who graduated Carver, and they wanted to go right to a college for nursing. And then I know Quincy College has a program. And,
Yep.
I don't know about UMass Dartmouth, but I know my wife and my mother both went to La Brea in Dorchester, and they look for it's kind of like they were excited to go. It's what they thought about for years.
Right.
So it might be something to look into as well.
Yeah, that's a lot of
Part
the
of it.
project, the Project Lead the Way program. One of the ones we're looking at is biomedical.
Great.
And it is a 4-year track preparing students to enter the health field.
I like manufacturing too, you know, so, yeah.
I like your thoughts on heading towards 8th grade, because again, that's, you know, we're talking about keeping kids in this town and in this school where they should be, and that's a path often that leads towards a vocational
Right.
school is in that timeframe, so.
Exposure, yeah.
Letting them see their opportunities here and the possibilities here is a great way to do that.
Yep.
I mean, I was just thinking about the nursing part of it. You have someone, a girl or a guy who wants to get in that field, and instead of going from college, I'm gonna go to a great college school, I can go use Carver as almost like a prep to get into a good nursing, a school with a good nursing program, or a health program, or wherever they wanna go. They could go for anything, culinary, and it's like a magnet, you know, to keep kids here. you know,
Yeah, and there's
so-
we could also tap into the resources in town. They've got the paramedic program, they've got
Yeah.
all these other trainings, they volunteer firefighters. There's a lot of options within that field that we could expose some of our resources.
I
So.
mean, even this is where it all intertwines, is I know that Middleborough actually, because our career counselor, Tammy Miller, also works in Middleborough. She's part-time here, part-time Middleborough. And they're also looking at doing a early college pathway through Massasoit. And the pathway they applied for, they were actually rejected, but the pathway they applied for was going to be an EMT pathway. And because Massasoit actually has an EMT program, and they were going to have the kids take the 4 courses they were going to take, were going to be towards a degree for the EMT program, and in collaboration with Middleborough. So, you know, what I said, like even the early college piece, you could look at a very specific program and target that and have 4 courses in that program.
You have a big task ahead of you.
Yeah, there's a lot of stuff here. We're gonna start small and start taking pieces of it
Excellent.
and look to move forward.
Very nice to hear that, which leads into our next.
It does.
Okay.
Thank you,
Yep.
Michael, very much.
So Brad's gonna start
Brad,
us
how are we
off.
gonna afford all of this, man?
Brad's going to start us off on the budget presentation. The only opening comment I want to make, which Brad was probably going to say anyhow, is obviously at our last meeting we kind of had a more detailed presentation of what a level service budget would be. We were going back and forth a little bit of whether we were going to rehash that entire presentation. We made a decision that didn't make sense to necessarily go through that whole presentation
Meeting on
again.
the 25th,
So Brad's going to kind of give an abbreviated version of that level service piece.
So Mary, go next slide. So this is small, I apologize. This just recaps where the town's proposal is, that now we have a hard number on that, they voted on that. So FY19, the town's number was $23,259,000. FY20, it's listed right now for $23,840,000, a $580,000 increase or 2.5%. The level of service that we presented to you guys on January 14th, that number was $23,259,000. For FY19, that's the same as what the town passed. That's what we approved last year, or the current operating year. In FY20, the proposal was $24,247,000, an increase of $987,000 or 4.25. Since then, and now to our level service as of today, there have been a few changes. It brought that number down to $24,161,000 or a $901,000 increase or 3.9% increase from the prior year. Changes on that were the electric bill at the elementary school. We finally got that under agreement. Kilowatts usage is way down back into line with where they originally projected it. So I guess as crazy as I thought it was the first couple months, maybe the systems really needed that kick through to go through cycling. We're back on the right page for that. Still not to the exact where we want to be in terms of kilowatt usage, but definitely trending in the right direction on that. So we were able to drop that line item down by 50,000. We're comfortable with that number. And also Plymouth County Retirement Board, we saved roughly 32,000 from that. That's an actuarial assessment that they come out with, and it actually decreased for both the school and town this current year. The problem with that is it's great that it decreased, but it could go up triple next year. You never really know depending on what they come up with for a number and what your your true need is. So while it's positive this year, I just want to be known, it may double, triple to catch up next year. It's kind of a roll of the dice on that number. And that's what brought us to our level service number as of today.
And just so to do that to give you a number on that, that would have the difference be $321,021, would what we'd be projecting to be short if we were gonna go with a level service budget. But we had kind of said before, that we've also been talking about ways in which we need to increase our supports for students. In November, we made a presentation, I made a presentation about our vision and positions we felt we needed to add within the district. So we're gonna kind of go back to that presentation and give you a very quick summary of that. Talk about some of the positions in the district we felt like we needed to expand, and then talk about what positions we're recommending for expansion for next year at this time, and talk about what the difference between what we're proposing would be from the town's number. So kind of recapping the November presentation, at that point, we talked about these are the things we're looking to do. We want to implement the Safe and Supportive Schools initiatives as outlined by the Department of Education, increase supports for early childhood education, develop a career and technical education program at the middle high school, which we just had a whole presentation on, increase enrollment in AP courses, this concept of access to a well-rounded education, increase dual enrollment opportunities, integrate, which we've just talked a little bit about again through the career pathways piece, integrate technology to have students explore, design, and create, and work with the town to maintain current facilities. And kind of from those vision statements, and those vision statements tied back to our strategic objectives that we referenced in the beginning of our career pathways presentation from the educational blueprint. From that vision, we identified a series of positions that we felt like we'd need to add. And at that time, we kind of said in 3 to 5 years. We said in 3 to 5 years, we'd love to see these positions added because this is what we're going to need to do to really fulfill that vision. And so the list of those positions were a middle high school technology engineering teacher, a middle high school technology integration teacher specialist, the grade 5 teacher, returning that to the elementary school, 5 full-time K-paras, increased from 5.5 K-paras, so we would have that early childhood support of having the K-paras in every classroom all day. Creation of an ESL budget line item, saying that the reality is our ESL student population is ever increasing, and right now we're covering that cost through different line items, but we don't have a dedicated line item within the district's budget for that. Reallocating Title I funds to support Tier 3 programming, with that concept being that right now, a lot of our Title I funds are used to cover not teaching positions, but para positions, positions within the district. Now, those positions are supporting students, but a lot of that support is happening, it's not what we would call a Tier 3 intervention. It's not directed, it's not one-on-one, it's not small group per se, and we said we should be used, it's not after-school programming, it's not additional programming, it's not summer programming. So some of the Title I funds to support your neediest students at the elementary school, we don't have those, we're not using those funds to run additional programs. And really that should be some of our goal of that funding. And then we also, it was a fairly long list. Meredith, you're kind of 2 slides behind. There we go, all right. Elementary school adjustment counselor, a health teacher at the middle high school guidance counselor, a BCBA assistant, social coaches. If we go on to the next page, a part-time technology support townwide and a part-time groundskeeper townwide. Now, the town has put a groundskeeper into the town side of the budget. So that is not, we had talked about that in November, that is on the town side of the budget, so that need is going to be filled. So obviously, we talked about that's a lot of positions. We talked about adding those things over 3 to 5 years in terms of supporting our vision. We do feel like some of those pieces are vitally important for next year. So tonight, we're making a presentation saying we feel like these positions need to be added into next year's budget on top of the presentation Brad just made in terms of where we are in regards to level service. So if you go to the next page, Meredith.
Just a recap of.
And we'll turn that back to Brad.
Yep, so the updated level service, we mentioned on the first slide. Para non-replacements, we're gonna take out 44,000. That's based on, again, it's a level service, just the needs of our students have decreased from graduations or changing of IEP needs. If you add in the middle high school tech teacher, just over 75,000. You add in the 5 part-time K-paras, 50,000 total, and a .3 tech support at 20,000. That brings our total budget to 24,263,000. If you take off the FY20 town proposal of 23,840,000, that leaves you a shortfall of 423,000.
And so obviously, we just made a presentation that was really focused around our need and our support for the middle high school tech teacher. I didn't necessarily ask Ruby to make a presentation about why we're looking to add the K-paras, but as we looked at the elementary school and said, what's the greatest area of need, there was a strong feeling that supporting those students in early literacy, supporting those kindergarten students, with the number of students we have in kindergarten classes, and having the full-time K-paras there would be a vital piece. And then district-wide, there's a reality piece of, we have a town-wide technology department that is servicing the entire town, and 3 people are doing that. But if you look at our building alone, the amount of devices we've brought in terms of technology, both the new technology at the elementary school, the one-to-one initiative at the middle high school, just the sheer number of devices that these 3 people have to support just within the school system, not talking about what they're supporting on the town side, that we felt that it would be important to add that tech support in as well. So we're making the argument that these 3 positions from that list we just went over are the most vital ones to look to add for next year. Brad?
Yep, and with the shortfall, I have to go to the next slide. There is a few things still in play, as we can discuss at our next budget working meeting. Health insurance rates stayed at 9% from our last meeting. There still is hope that that will drop to 8%, and if that does, that's a $30,000 savings we see in our budget. Aggie tuitions, we're going off current enrollment right now. We won't have that number probably till April or May, unfortunately. I'm confident that we're solid on that.
You
but
convinced
again,
me there, man.
I'm real confident.
That's where we are right now, and obviously, we want to play a conservative approach. We'd love to say that there is one student who's graduating. We kept them on the books just to say one more will go out. Conservative approach on it. And school choice expansion we can talk about at the middle high school or even the elementary school on grade openings that we think may be a good fit. Again, that's 5,000 plus any sped incremental chargeback. And retirements, we do have a few. Not all have been built into the budget, but there is roughly $10,000 to $30,000 savings per retirement that we can build back in as we get the letters.
Okay. And so ultimately, we're not looking for the committee to take any action on any of this evening. It's just a discussion point of where we currently stand in terms of the town's proposed budget for the school system and what our level of service and our current needs. I know we do have the joint meeting coming up on Wednesday evening where we're going to discuss some of this again with the Board of Selectmen. And then our next presentation, which is going to be the Monday after February vacation, the 25th. On the 25th, we will, because we have to make a public statement of if it ends up being the town's number, what would we have to reduce to meet that town's number? Mm-hmm. So on the 25th, there'll be a presentation about what positions would be reduced district-wide to meet that number. And that might include taking off some of the list of things we want to add. We're going to weigh those things out, but we wanted to make a statement saying we feel these positions are important to add prior to having so when we come back on the 25th, maybe not all 3 of those positions are going to be there saying, or it's really the K-paras is more than one position. I'm calling it a position. It's really 5 positions. Those may not be on that list when we look at reductions, but they may be as well. So we're weighing all those things out. So maybe we make the argument that we need the technology teacher and we need to add that even if it comes at that becomes a choice to reduce or restructure other things. So the meeting on the 25th will come back with what the budget would look like to meet the town's number. And then
Vote in March.
And then a goal would be to have a public hearing and vote a budget in March, after we weigh all those pieces out. So Brad, I don't know if there's anything else you want to add?
No.
Or any thoughts or questions at this point?
I know that we were kind of holding off for the 25th, so my only real question, the only thing that I would have is the conversation as to what number you may come with. The way you described it to me, or I just heard, was that you would come on the 25th with possibly a different scenario than what you're telling us right now.
Yes,
And I'm just
possibly.
curious where that comes from over the course of the next 2 weeks. Like,
Oh, obviously, we've been in discussion about this.
I'm not saying you haven't. What I'm getting at is, so you brought this one today.
Yeah.
And then in 2 weeks, there's another scenario that you're gonna, so.
Of how we might meet these
So,
Sounds
goals.
good.
so then we kind of just look at all of them to try to figure out different ideas, that?
Yeah, as a committee, you can make a decision to vote a budget number you choose to vote. You can vote,
But what I was getting at is looking at these individual add-ons as
Absolutely.
individual add-ons, and we really are gonna kind of do an à la carte type of conversation on the 25th. And
absolutely.
that's what I thought. Fine,
absolutely.
no problem.
Well, and we're gonna make we're gonna make recommendations, but clearly, the committee can weigh in and say, the committee
I
can,
like the à la carte. I'm
yeah,
good.
yeah, and the committee can go back and pull other positions from that list if they felt strongly about them. You know, these are the recommendations from the administrative team, and who we've been looking at this, but absolutely, yeah.
And I'll say, narrowing it down to these 3 positions, we've been working at this for probably 4 months now, trying to narrow this list down to come to you guys with what really is our core.
And that,
We'd love
right,
to-
and that's where we started back in November. November was like, this is the 3 to 5 year vision of what we feel like we really need to add.
We actually started talking about this last summer.
Right, really,
So,
yeah.
Any others?
No, I'm good.
Stephanie?
No, I'm good, thank you.
Andy?
I want to see what comes out of the aggregate, so I'll reserve comments
This time.
at this time.
Yeah, well, I mean, we have a meeting Wednesday,
Right.
Yeah.
and then we'll meet again on the 25th,
Exactly.
so.
Yep.
This was just sort of informational.
Yep.
Now we get to money. Budget transfers.
Let's open up that document. This has a lot of the changes now with the new contract coming in play. We've had a payroll, so it's just adjusting all of the journal entries for the salaries. With 2/3 of our staff on the highest step, obviously, there is a lot of movement in between the line items. Nothing really major to highlight. You'll see a few look heavy, like if you looked at line number 6, teacher salary, K through 5 for the elementary level, we're actually moving $103,000 out of that line item. But it's a combination of a few things. We had a couple retirements on that line, and we also, don't forget, when we budget, we put our horizontal movement for the salary lane changes in that line as well. So even though.
But I don't know if I'm the one who missed it, I thought you said
Six.
line 6,
6 is not it.
yeah.
It's superintendent salary, right?
I'm on journal entry. Go to,
Oh, sorry.
sorry, hit the second. My bad.
JE.
Yeah. Because we're all like, line
Big
6
cut,
is not,
Scott has done a
yeah.
rip for us there.
Sorry, Scott.
Just
Sorry. So journal entry number 6, that's the K through 5 regular ed. Again, it's a lot of combination. It's a couple retirements. I know when we built our original budget, we left all the retirements that we had and changes in the actual budget because we said we have to cover salary increases. So that's in there, as well as the horizontal movement, and part of a teacher salary we charged off the Title I this year as well. So about 45,000 that is directly allocated towards that. That's now being charged off the Title I, which freed up 45,000 in that budget line item. If you keep scrolling down, you'll see world history, or excuse me, world language, line 16, 28,000 moving out of that. Again, that's a savings from a retirement that we had last year. Again, covers the expenses throughout the other line items. For salary movement, long-term subs, if you look at 24 and 25, I'm taking 15,000 out of the short-term sub account and putting that into long-term. We have a lot of long-term absences coming up in April through maternity, a few surgeries, but realistically, there may be a need to change over more money in that line item right now, but overall, in terms of our sub account, we are in good shape if you combine both. Keep going down, line number 47. 47 is our bus driver salaries K through 12. That 20,000 represents the change that we had in terms of when we dropped the bus this year, when we had the bus driver who left, we were able to consolidate routes. We're transferring that money right into sped contracted services for transportation, the line item right below it. Again, that line seems to have activity on it every day for contracted services. We'll drop one, we'll consolidate a route, and then we'll add one on. So unfortunately, it's been to the negative all year, and that's not gonna change right now. Same thing as the homeless transportation, line 49 right below it. We're kicking 10 grand in that account as well. just based on, we've had a couple of students who've moved into Carver who we have to transport back to their original district. And we really have no choice. Again, it's a cost share on that,
Yep.
which is always a positive, but it's still money for transportation, which we would like to avoid when possible, to keep it in the classroom, but realistically, we have to get the kids to school. It's our responsibility.
Brad, can you expand on 56? Is that reflective of the move by the
Yep.
town for the
Yep,
groundskeeper?
yep. So this represents money that we moved early in the year, based on the conversation that we had with the town. There's a misunderstanding between me and the town offices in regards to who would be funding the groundskeeper for FY 19, the current year we're in. This has no impact on next year.
Right.
We've actually built this back into FY 20, fully covered, to offset that, and that's why when we went through our budget presentation in January, the facilities line items were, I think, like $170,000 off, and that 44 was part of that.
Okay.
This is journal entering the money over, and we'll journal entry money this to the town, where the salary actually resides right now. So this is getting back to good on everything where it should have been at the beginning of the year.
Okay.
And we're all on the same page for that for next year, so that will not happen again. And that's it. There's no other major things.
That's short.
Short and sweet. Is it really sweet, though?
The first tab, we're all set on that one, the two?
First tab is just, that's the 2-1 overall budget. The journal entries is the second
I
tab.
gotcha.
Yep.
So I would entertain a motion.
So I'll make a motion to approve the budget transfers for February.
Second.
Motion made and second. Any more questions, discussions?
One more thing I want to add on here is, we are in good shape in terms of custodial, not salaries and whatnot, but actual equipment and supplies and materials, that if we do have some savings there, I'd love to move that into the special ed accounts, because we are still 170,000 in the red on there. And the more money we're able to free up for that, the more money that stays in that reserve account. For the
Yeah.
town, which if it isn't, I don't want to say fully funded, but funded to where we'd love it to be in terms of next year's,
Which was
free cash.
250,
Yeah.
right, but it's not,
It's, yeah, we've.
It's like
depleted
112 or
it's
something, I
Roughly
think.
right around 185 right now.
185.
So if we take 170 of it, we have 15 rolling into whatever the town adds on.
And right now, I think the town's proposing 100,000
That's
of
what
free
it was.
cash,
Yep.
100,000
So
for
the
next year.
The more we can keep in there, rolling over, the better off we are next year as well.
Yep. I concur. With all that said, all those in favor?
Aye.
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 Unanimous?
All right, moving on to community use of school facilities policy. So I'm going to make a recommendation at this time that we table this again until till the 25th. The rationale for that is that I think this is on our agenda for the joint meeting on Wednesday. So we've been working with the town and the rec department in terms of kind of maybe trying to unify a policy in terms of facility use and fees for facilities use. The Board of Selectmen wants to discuss that with the committee on Wednesday night. I think it would make sense that we'd have that discussion prior to taking any action on this item. So that would be my recommendation, as we move this to the meeting on the 25th. And the meeting on the 25th would just be our budget presentation and this item.
Do we need to, we don't need to vote to table that,
Nope,
do
we don't need to
Just Table it?
So tabled.
All right, we do have one field trip request for this evening.
I'll make a motion to approve the student council trip to MASC in Hyannis.
Second.
Motion made and seconded. Any questions, comments? You sure you want to send her?
Great.
All right, fine. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. It's unanimous.
All right.
Thank you. Reports from the school committee.
I'll just wish all the kids and parents and teachers and admins a nice February vacation to get ready for the remainder of the school year. And, just have a good time and stay safe.
Agreed. I think everyone's ready for a little bit of a break, and everyone please stay safe. Lord knows what we're going to get tomorrow. We'll have to see what Mother Nature decides to deliver to us. And I would like to encourage people to pay attention to the upcoming meetings that we're having in terms of us addressing budget issues, so people can feel free to speak up and make their voices heard. Our meeting on the 25th, and then there'll be the hearing in March. So I just want people to realize that it's important that,
Which is March 11th, I believe, is our March school committee meeting is March 11th.
Yes.
excellent. So if you have the opportunity to come or get involved, we would love to have you join us. Stay safe.
I just want to just mention one thing. There was I saw it in passing, just the other night. A school administrator in Watertown was actually killed by a hit-and-run driver. And her name was Allison Donovan. And I just wanted to see if maybe we could think of her and her family in our prayers. And I guess you just never know when things are going to happen. But she was an asset to her community. And I just saw it in passing. I just wanted to mention it.
I would conclude by concurring on driving safe tomorrow, but whatever comes tomorrow should be washed away by rain on Wednesday,
That would be good.
as our oceans are staying warm. Hope everyone has a safe and happy vacation. And with that, I would accept a motion.
Make a motion to head to executive session for the purpose of considering a complaint against an individual and review of related executive session minutes.
Second,
Do not return.
second.
Motion made and seconded. That is a roll call, I believe.
Aye.
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 Aye. All those in favor unanimous? Meeting is adjourned. Thank you very much.